Hi, I'm Tom Burgess, and thank you for listening to The Real Agenda, the podcast of political change. Today we're looking to see who is responsible. Well, not necessarily who's responsible for the political mess we're in now, because a blame game can certainly be a waste of time. It's more about businesses who are behaving responsibly, or indeed not behaving responsibly, and who pay their tax that is due and don't send it overseas or stash the cash under the metaphorical mattress. Now, it's been said that tax is the price we pay for civilization. We know the tax system is complicated and it's unfair, and it makes life even more difficult for those on low income. But what tax is fair? Well, I would say that taxes on wealth are fair, and wealth is partly represented by the profits that companies generate and which we have helped to create. That's either as employees, customers, suppliers, or just taxpayers that provide the infrastructure, education and health service for businesses to thrive. So a tax on profits could be seen as fair. The problem is too many companies are not paying their fair share and finding ever more ways to avoid it. Now that's not fair on the rest of us. That means we all pay more for the services that we voted for. Now luckily, there is an organisation that can help businesses behave better. It's called the Fair Tax Mark. So when I was in Manchester recently, I went to speak to Sam Al-Hamdani, Marketing and Communications Manager, and I started by asking Sam, what is wrong with the business tax system?
I think the problem with business taxation, not specifically with business taxation, but with a lot of businesses and the information about their taxation, is that there is a lack of transparency from a lot of businesses. It makes it very difficult for consumers to then look at what businesses do and what good behaviour is, because information about their taxes is often hidden away in their accounts. It's not easy to find, and because reporting requirements differ according to the size of company, but often don't require a lot of information about what's going on with companies' taxes, you can see some sort of headline figure, assuming that the company is working in this country, but often if they're working overseas, you can't even see that. So you can't see as a consumer what companies are doing and whether they are behaving in a way which fits with your values around tax. There is a huge movement growing up around that. You can see that people have started campaigning around things like Amazon, sort of the big headline companies, Facebook, Netflix, which draw attention for their tax behaviour, and there is a huge public concern about that. We've done assessments over the last 5 years where we've polled consumers about what their most important issues are around corporate behaviour, and pretty much every time tax behaviour comes out top. So we know that the consumers are really worried about this. We can see that in specific cases they're prepared to take action about it. You know, there've been boycotts of Amazon in particular, but we've seen it around other companies as well. But there's so little information out there, especially with less headline companies, that it makes it very, very difficult for consumers to know what to do. So what we want to do is encourage companies to be more vocal, more transparent about their own behaviour, to make it clear that, you know, if they are supposed to be paying tax, this is the tax that they pay. We focus on corporation tax. We look at UK companies, or we're starting now to look at international companies as well, but primarily we focus on UK-based companies. And we have a set of criteria that we run assessments with that will, if the company passes, mean that they are putting information out in the public domain. So we're not saying that they're perfect companies in any way, but what we're saying is they are clear about the way that they're behaving. They are paying what tax they should be paying on corporation tax, and they are giving you the information as a consumer to make a fair judgment.
So what's the goal then of the Fair Tax Mark?
We're trying to change the way that all companies behave around tax. Quite often tax is seen as a task, it's something to be avoided, literally tax avoidance. It's something that actually is part of the way that companies are tied into society, and we want to change the idea that companies have and that people have, so that they look at tax as part of their responsibility. And ideally, we'd like to make it so that all companies thought that corporation tax is a good thing, it's part of our participation in society, and being transparent about it, paying what we owe, is just something that we do.
Is it like shifting the culture from avoiding tax to actually paying tax being a badge of honour of a good company?
Is exactly what we're looking to do. We give people the fair tax mark. We've got this heart logo that we use that is the stamp once you get the assessment, and we would love to see sort of companies up and down the land. If you were on the high street, you would look in a shop window, and in the same way that you would see that the company might be a living wage company, you see the fair tax mark and you know that that is a badge of a good corporate tax citizen.
So how does it actually, the process work with companies that get the fair tax mark?
We have currently 3 standards. A company would have to approach us to be assessed. They would either go under a small business assessment, standard business assessment, or for multinationals we have separate assessment. And that's because different companies have different reporting requirements automatically. So you couldn't assess a company that works multinationally. They have to do different things. So it wouldn't be fair to assess them on exactly the same standard. So they would approach us. The way it works, it's split into 2 parts. One is we carry out the assessment, so they pay us to assess the way that they behave, and we would run an ongoing process with them. It's a dialogue. We look at their accounts, we look at their reporting, we look at their website and how they publicise the information around tax, and we would go back to them with a report saying, this is what you do well, this is what you don't do so well, this is what you would need to change to pass. And as a general rule, most companies, even relatively well-behaved companies, would need to change something just to make that information more easy for people to digest. You know, most people aren't tax professionals. Most people aren't confident looking through a company's accounts and being able to pull out the information about what tax they're paying. And it's not something, I studied economics at university, but still going through somebody's accounts and really picking out that detail is not an easy thing to do. So changing the way that they do that, quite often we will ask them to provide a narrative. So rather than just the accounts, they'll actually talk through what they're doing, so that if there may be perfectly reasonable things why a company might not pay as much tax, they might be doing research and development. And you know, that's a great thing for the company, but also for our society and the way that our economy works. So getting a tax credit for that is a perfectly reasonable thing to do, and so that company wouldn't necessarily be paying the headline rate, but they need to explain that and be clear about that to consumers so that the consumer can understand what's going on there. So we'll work with them on providing a narrative, providing clear information about accounts, publicising it well through their website, and assuming that they do all that, they would get a pass mark. We sort of, as a standard, we have a point system, and if they scored 14 out of 20, they would get or higher, they would get the fair tax mark. That's for a year, because accounts are covering a year period, so they would hold that for a year, and then we will assess the next set of accounts and run that process on.
So how much do you think country is losing out by companies not being upfront about their tax?
It's a very, very difficult question to put an exact figure on.
Well, exact may be difficult, but...
So if you speak to HMRC, they would say that tax avoidance almost doesn't exist. If you speak to some people in tax campaigning industry, they would talk in terms of tens or even hundreds of billions. It's difficult to say that either of those figures is correct. We tend to go with an analysis which says that there's around 7 billion an annum lost to the Exchequer through tax avoidance.
Companies?
From corporation tax, yes. That's a figure we're confident about, but you would be able to find people out there who would try and push that figure in either direction.
So that's still significant in the sense it's about 1 billion, it's 1% of government budget.
It's a very significant figure. If you look at the sort of figures that people are putting on, putting a percent on income tax to pay for an increase in spending on the NHS, they're looking at that sort of amount as what they would generate to spend in that area. So if we could eliminate tax avoidance, you suddenly, and working out to that figure, you're suddenly looking at, oh no, that figure that everyone says we need for the NHS, that's there.
Well, that is one of the things, isn't it? Because for a lot of government programs or programs on behalf of the country, the money is there. We're just asking the wrong people for it, or the wrong people are not paying a contribution. So with companies, they're generating wealth, but of course it's then accumulated by the few, in the sense of the shareholders. I actually don't have any problem with that. It's just that we get to extreme levels and we're keeping wages down and things at the same time. Do you think that message is understood, that we actually are creating the wealth, we're all creating the wealth, and that, you know, companies should be, because of that, should be putting more back into the economy, into the community?
Yes.
They will say they're generating jobs and all this sort of thing, but
there's a lot of nuance involved in this, and people don't always like nuance. People like to hear headline figures and shouting and grabbing attention about very specific things. There's a lot of companies out there that are doing a good job and they aren't shouting about it, and there are a lot of companies who you might not expect. You know, people kind of think of tax avoidance coming from these big, huge corporate monoliths, but actually there's a lot of smaller companies who are not necessarily behaving as they should be around tax.
You get a lot of people, or business people, who think, well, I've taken the risk, you know, I'm creating jobs, I'm doing all these things, therefore it's my money. You know, understand that viewpoint. Is it their money? So people say, I'm a self-made person, whereas in fact, yes, but who provided the education for your team, you know, who provided the roads for your trucks and all that sort of thing?
We talk a lot about the right amount of tax in the right place at the right time. And as a society, we have fixed upon certain levels of taxation that we think are fair as a society. So as an individual, if you're an individual running a company, if you're saying, well, I made this money, it's my decision. Well, yes, but as a society, we've also decided that this is a fair way to approach putting money back into the community, to pay for programs around society, to help fund education or health and all those things which make it possible to have that successful business. So we're not a campaigning organisation. We don't try and tell you what that corporation tax rate should be, but society has currently decided that around 20% in the UK, or going down slightly at the moment, but that's a reasonable amount for people to pay, and that should be paid in general. There are reasons why we would want to fund certain business activity. We want to encourage people to do research and development and pensions. Great. We want to encourage entrepreneurs to do startup activity. You know, there are different reasons why different companies might pay different tax rates at different times. That's fine. But when you're supposed to be paying a certain amount of tax, we want to see that you're paying it.
And that's what the Fair Tax Mark does, to make sure that that's particularly clear. As you said, you're not a campaigning organisation as such. How do you cooperate with the campaigning organisations that are on tax justice?
We do work as in collaboration. So organisations like Tax Research, which Richard Murphy, who founded Tax Research, also helped to found the Fair Tax Mark, and still advises and talks to us about areas of policy detail, what's happening, what we should be doing, whether we should be responding to that. We also work with Tax Justice UK. We speak internationally as well. We work with Eurodad, European Network on Debt and Development. We'll talk to all these people and look at where we have expertise and where they have expertise, and how we can work together to encourage good behaviour. There need to be people out there shouting about bad behaviour, and that's great. But there should also be people doing good work with businesses, and where businesses are doing good work, giving them a pedestal to show what they're doing well. You need both of those aspects. So what we think we're doing is we're showing off good business behaviour. And if we can do that and somebody else goes and campaigns on the streets, then together we can provide the right environment that bad behaviour is challenged but good behaviour is celebrated.
So if I'm running a company, what is the benefit of getting the fair tax mark? Why would I want to do it?
A combination of things. Primarily, if you have the fair tax mark, then consumers know that one of their prime concerns about corporate behaviour is something that you're doing well. It is the key concern for consumers above wages. We regularly get tax behaviour of companies is the top ranked concern of consumers. So if you can turn around to people who are buying your product and say, this thing that you're concerned about, we're doing it right. So you can talk to your audience and say, we're doing the right thing. On top of that, it's good practice to know exactly what you're doing with your taxes. I mean, we encourage them to go into more detail to understand better what good practice is. We will often go through companies' accounts and draw out more detail, which they will find useful in their own analysis of what they're doing. So it is actually a beneficial thing for your understanding of your business and how it's working, to be able to understand yourself exactly what's going on there. Because depending on the size of the organisation, if you're a tiny business, you might not have the expertise in tax to understand the fine detail, and you will rely on an accountant to go through your accounts and provide information on it. But they won't necessarily be doing that from a values point of view. They will just be doing it from a compliance point of view. If you're an organisation that wants to be a more socially focused organisation, to understand that you are doing the best you can do around tax, if you're somebody who thinks, I want to pay my fair share, I want to contribute to society. Part of the reason why social enterprises are now thriving in the UK, increasing in numbers, is because there are so many people out there who, as part of their business practice, want to do the right thing. So you can understand the way that your business is working and how it can fit with that, and how it can do the right thing by coming to us and going through the fair tax mark assessment.
So if I'm a company, how much does that cost?
Varies according to the size of the company, because tax affairs vary massively. But if you're a small business, you're talking about a couple of £100, going up to large businesses, a few thousand.
So how many businesses in the UK now have the fair tax mark?
We've just accredited our 50th business, Affinity Water, one of the major water companies, and we've seen a lot of work actually in this area around public utilities. It's an interesting area because it's such a public value as an industry. There is more of a focus happening at the moment around companies' tax behaviour. So we have accredited SSE, have been one of the companies that have held the fair tax mark for the longest time, but we've accredited Pennon Group, we've accredited Affinity Water, and so especially companies that are working in that sort of public sector field, it's a growing area for us.
So there's a couple of things here. One, it's obviously trying to be a good company, and two, more money going into the exchequer to pay for the public services that people want. So you've got 50 companies so far. So how can we actually ramp that up a bit? How can we get more companies to do this?
I think by, as individuals, write to companies that you think are companies you want to behave well, and either challenge them. If it's a company you think are doing the wrong thing, challenge them on that. We celebrate the good behaviour more than we go after the bad behaviour. But personally, I don't shop with Amazon. I won't do that. And that's over their tax behaviour. And that's a personal thing, that's not an organisational thing. Talk to companies that you think are not behaving well and challenge them on it. If it's a company that you want to see doing the right thing, it's not an expensive process. Tell them about the fair tax mark. Say that you want to shop with them and you want to see that accreditation on their products. It's a pretty inexpensive process for a company to go through, and it will help them. Encourage that. We run Fair Tax Week in the summer. We run a series of events around taxation, what it means for companies, what fair tax is. Part of that we'll have Tax Justice Sunday, where the church is getting involved, and they will be having sermons at churches up and down the country to talk about what tax means in society, how it benefits society, what people can do individually or as organisations. As part of that, the church is looking at its procurement, or looking at what it does and whether it can encourage good tax behaviour in companies that it does business with. And that's a major thing. The companies that already have the fair tax mark can talk to each other. If you run your own company and you are interested in this thing, then talk to other companies as well and see if you can work with companies that behave in the right way around tax.
Okay, thanks very much indeed, Sam. Good luck with what you're doing, and I hope we can see more companies signing up for the fair tax mark.
Thank you very much.
Well, thanks for that, Sam. You can find out more about the fair tax mark at fairtaxmark.net. The concept of the fair tax mark seems a great one. It should be a badge of honour to pay tax on corporate profits and return some of the wealth that we all helped create to the community and be seen as a responsible business. So to make this happen, do we need legislation to be responsible, or should it be voluntary? Well, there is one way to incentivise business to be more responsible, and this is by what we call social offsetting. The rate of corporation tax could actually be increased significantly, but then companies that have accreditation for things like the fair tax mark or our living wage employer or have good green credentials will get reductions and tax breaks. This could also apply to firms that don't have extreme pay diversity and not paying their CEO 300 times as much as their lowest paid workers, and those companies that share profits, that provide welfare, that run training, and also do not make political contributions. We can all help make change happen by being selective about who we buy from. If they show the fair tax mark, then that sure is one sign of a responsible company. So what do you think? Do email us at info@realagendaradio.org with your comments and ideas, as this is your show and we'd love to hear from you. So what's up next on The Real Agenda? Well, we'll have more MPs soon on the Around the House series, and we're also meeting inspiring campaigners on our Challengers for Change series. So do subscribe. Are you interested in getting involved in podcasting or creating programs? We're looking to grow our team of volunteers. Just email us for more info at info@realagendaradio.org. And you can also check out our website at realagendaradio.org. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter. And a special thanks to our sponsors, Reverse Media Group, one of the fastest growing search and media companies. Find out why at reversemediagroup.com. One thing is certain, people want to see change to a more compassionate and just society, as well as a more courageous politicians prepared to do the right thing for people over party. It's urgent and it's up to us to make it happen. That's The Real Agenda. I'm Tom Burgess. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.